Welcome, listeners. I'm Silas, your sleepy storyteller, pulling you down the rabbit hole of time, where dreams and memories intertwine. If you enjoy these videos, please tap the like button. It really helps. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can keep drifting along on your sleepy journey through history. And before we wander down the rabbit hole, share your city and time in the comments. I love imagining our journey threading through every ticking clock. Now, take a moment to find a comfortable resting position. Close your eyes gently, and in your own time, allow yourself to sink into the quiet atmosphere of the past as we begin our slow journey together. I step forward, boots crunching over cracked asphalt, and the Pripyat city sign comes into view. Once, in 1986, it welcomed families with optimism, a proud emblem of Soviet progress. I remember walking past it just after the evacuation, the streets still echoing with hurried footsteps, the faint smell of smoke lingering in the air, the metallic tang of fear and uncertainty. Children's shoes left abandoned on sidewalks, school satchels tossed aside. These small tokens of human life haunted the city even as people fled. Today, 30 years later, the sign is nearly devoured by ivy, moss climbing over weathered letters, the bright paint dulled, but the echoes of both past and present pulse beneath my fingers. The air is dense with the scent of damp earth, rotting wood, and something metallic. Remnants of what humans left behind and the subtle persistence of radiation in the soil. I can feel the weight of time pressing down, the contrast of a living city in 1986 and the silent reclaimed space it has become. Standing here, I sense the duality of Pripyat, its fleeting human heartbeat and the slow, meticulous triumph of nature. I make my way to Lenin Square, the heart of the city, where I once strolled amidst evacuation chaos. I remember the eerie stillness back then, benches lined with abandoned lunches, newspapers flapping in the sudden wind, the residual sounds of hurried footsteps fading down the avenues. The square should have been alive with laughter, the chatter of children, the hum of daily routines. But the explosion had rendered it a frozen moment in panic, the invisible presence of radiation lurking just beyond sight. Now, nature dominates. Trees thrust their roots through cracked concrete, twisting and cracking sidewalks as though reclaiming the city itself. Ivy climbs over shattered fountains, wrapping stone and metal alike in creeping green tendrils. Even the banners for May Day hang shredded, twisted into new forms by wind and time. In the distance, the Ferris wheel rises like a skeletal sentinel, its empty spokes visible against the sky. A muted reminder of joys once celebrated here. Its closer inspection reserved for later chapters, but its presence looming over the square like a distant promise. Movement catches my eye. A wolf emerges from the shadowed edge of the square. Its fur is mottled, coarse, streaked with ash-colored patches, eyes glowing a molten gold. Time and radiation have hardened it, sharpened its instincts, yet there is a strange intelligence in its gaze. I freeze, boots barely pressing against the moss-covered asphalt, aware that this creature rules the square now. It steps closer, muscles rippling beneath its pelt, each paw fall almost soundless, yet loaded with a predatory tension that makes my chest tighten. I remember the wolves back in 1986, lingering at the periphery of the evacuated city, cautious, but drawn to the sudden silence. The memory adds to the weight of this encounter. The same square, 30 years apart, life and shadow intersecting again. The wolf pauses a heartbeat from me, nostrils flaring, ears angled toward every sound of my intrusion. Its eyes burn with the stories of survival, of adaptation in a land humans abandoned, and the faint scar of radiation evident in the slight asymmetry of its features. Then, with a deliberate grace, it slinks into the shadows between crumbling apartment blocks, leaving a silence so heavy it presses against my ears. I exhale, feeling both relief and awe, acutely aware that I am a visitor in a domain no longer wholly human. My gaze drifts over the square. A deer grazes near a toppled bench, antlers tangling with ivy, fur streaked with ash and gray. Red foxes weave between fractured street signs and vines, moving with a cautious, almost conspiratorial awareness. Birds flit through the skeletal fountains, their wings brushing against rusted frames that were once proud centers of social life. Squirrels dart along cracked ledges, tails flicking like tiny metronomes marking time. I recall walking here in 1986, just after the evacuation. Every creature, every object felt suspended on the cusp between human departure and natural reclamation. I move slowly over moss-covered pavement, tracing my steps with care. The cracked concrete, leaning signs, and toppled benches are not merely debris. They are the framework upon which nature is building a new order. Roots twist through the foundations, vines lace over stone, and trees have grown tall enough to brush against the second floors of apartment blocks. Even the air smells different, infused with damp earth, decaying wood, and the subtle metallic undertone of a city once alive, now slowly transforming. Every detail is a meditation on impermanence and resilience. The echoes of 1986 whisper beneath my feet. Hurried parents calling children, the distant wail of alarms, the tight tension in the air as everyone fled with what they could carry. Now, those echoes are threads woven into the larger tapestry of 30 years of reclamation. Nature has softened the harsh lines of human design, weaving green tendrils through the angularity of Soviet architecture, threading life through stone, steel, and glass. The square stretches before me, a cathedral of memory. Faded footprints from my own past intersect with the present. Broken fountains, moss-laden benches, and the skeletal Ferris wheel in the distance speak of life paused and resumed in unexpected ways. Birdsong threads through the quiet, mingling with the rustle of leaves and the occasional scuttle of small animals. Every movement is a reminder that life persists, evolving quietly, insistently, and unobserved, just as it always has. The Pripyat city sign stands sentinel, a monument to human ambition, now softened and reshaped by time and nature. Moss crawls over the letters. Roots push through the base. Vines twist around the edges like fingers writing a new story. I step carefully, feeling textures shift beneath my boots, sensing the interplay of memory, decay, and survival. Lenin Square, Pripyat, the skeletal amusement park looming in the distance. This is a place where history, human and natural, collide in silence, and where I walk as both witness and participant, bridging decades in the quiet pulse of life reclaiming its own. I step off the cracked sidewalks and approach the Palace of Culture, energetic. Its once proud facade now draped in ivy and shadow. The building, a monument to Soviet pride and communal life, once hummed with music, dance, and the laughter of families. In 1986, just hours after the evacuation, I wandered these halls as if ghosting through the echoes of a city still vibrating with life. Lessons lay abandoned mid-step. A violin left on a chair, sheet music fluttering from broken stands. The smell of chalk and dust still lingering faintly in the classrooms. Today, 30 years later, the building is skeletal, its roof sagging, windows gaping like hollow eyes, ivy clawing its way through every crevice. My boots crunch over broken tile and glass as I cross the threshold. The air smells thick, a pungent blend of damp wood, mildew, and the faint tang of iron. It's alive, but not with human life. The soundscape is entirely different now. The scrape of talons against stone, the distant thump of hooves on concrete, the soft whisper of leaves sneaking through shattered windows. Wolves weave through the debris, their coats mottled with gray and rust, faces angular and keen from decades of adaptation. A family of wild boars roots methodically among overturned chairs and splintered furniture, snouts probing the earth for remnants of what humans once left behind. Birds, with pale, mutated feathers, flit across broken window frames. The soft brush of wings, a reminder that life, in all its strange forms, has persisted where humans fled. I pause on the cracked stage. In 1986, I remember standing here, the echoes of music and applause still clinging faintly in the corners, imagining an audience of evacuated families watching a dance performance paused mid-step. Banners for holidays and Soviet achievements would have hung from the rafters, lights flickering with the hum of electricity still feeding the building. Now, silence reigns. The stage is coated in dust, broken chairs sprawled across the floor, vines reaching out like green veins to claim every inch. I can almost hear the echoes of laughter and music, faint and fragile, threaded with a sense of sudden, unfulfilled abandonment. Moving through the hallways, I sense the duality of time. My own memories from 1986 overlay the present, the hurried footsteps, the faint smell of smoke, the quiet tension of invisible radiation lurking in the air. Now, 30 years later, the rooms are empty, nature's reclamation complete in some corners, partial in others. Trees have pushed through the foundations, roots splitting floors like veins cracking through stone. Ivy climbs the walls with deliberate patience, snaking around steel beams, wrapping remnants of chandeliers, draping over stair railings as if guiding me toward higher ground. The Policia Hotel rises ahead, its facade scarred and crumbling. I start my ascent toward the rooftop, the wind tugging at loose sections of concrete and carrying the faint scent of the distant reactor. Every step is an echo of the past, metal stairs groaning, tiles giving way beneath my weight. Somewhere above, a branch snaps. I freeze. My pulse quickens. There, crouched along the edge of the shattered roof, a lynx watches me with eyes like liquid amber. Its fur is patterned strangely, streaked with patches of pale color, the subtle mark of radiation's persistent influence. Muscles ripple beneath its coat, lithe and deliberate, every movement precise and predatory. I remember 1986, standing in the same city, sensing the wildness at the edges of the evacuation zone. Wolves skirted the tree lines, foxes darted through open spaces, cautious but curious. But this lynx, it feels different, like the apex of a species reshaped by time, absence, and the silent pressure of radiation. My boots scrape against debris, and it stiffens, ears twitching, tail flicking with slow, deliberate precision. I feel my heartbeat accelerate. Every instinct tells me that I am intruding, that the city's wild reclaimers are aware of me, cataloging my movements. The lynx springs. Its movement is fluid, sudden, a blur of claws and sinew. I stumble backward, grabbing a rusted pipe to steady myself. The creature lands just a few feet from me, eyes unblinking, fur bristling slightly. There is no malice, not in the way humans conceive it, but a pure, unyielding presence of survival. In this moment, the contrast between human ambition, abandoned hotels, palaces of culture, Ferris wheels, and the raw power of nature is undeniable. Life thrives, adapts, persists. Radiation has reshaped its form, perhaps sharpened its senses, and I feel the tension between curiosity and danger press against my skin. Slowly, deliberately, it retreats along the edge of the rooftop, disappearing into shadows cast by broken concrete walls. My chest heaves, adrenaline mingling with awe. I continue my climb, boots tracing the fractured stairwell to the top of the Policia Hotel. From here, the city stretches in every direction, a patchwork of green and gray, nature intertwining with human remnants. Moss blankets concrete, vines creep along the walls, and trees push through cracked streets with silent determination. A moose grazes in the courtyard below, massive and slow, its antlers brushing the branches of a tree that has grown taller than many of the apartment buildings. Birds wheel overhead, some with feathers so pale they seem ghostly, traces of a species adapting to a land now tinged with radiation and absence. In the distance, Reactor 4 sits like a dark sentinel, the sarcophagus enclosing the disaster in layers of concrete and history. I remember 1986, glimpsing it through the haze of evacuation, smoke curling, an invisible threat brushing every inhale with danger. Today, its presence is quieter, but no less formidable, looming over the reclaimed city like a reminder of human fragility. The air smells different up here, cleaner, perhaps, but tinged with the faint metallic undertone of time, decay, and the lingering influence of radiation on flora and fauna. I trace my gaze back toward the Palace of Culture, the cracked stages, shattered windows, and skeletal balconies tell stories of halted ambition and nature's slow reclamation. Even the faint sunlight, falling in fractured beams through broken roofs, illuminates dust motes that float lazily, catching the outlines of small creatures, squirrels, foxes, birds, living in a world that humans abandoned, but which now teems with strange, mutated vitality. I pause to reflect. In 1986, just after the evacuation, these rooftops were silent, but not empty. I remember hearing faint alarms in the distance, the low murmur of conversations between officials coordinating escape, the subtle tension of invisible danger. Every building, every street, every park. This city was full of life and worry, anticipation and fear. Now, silence dominates, punctuated by the living reclaimers of Pripyat, the lynx, the wolves, the birds, the deer, the foxes. The pulse of the city has shifted from human activity to the quiet, unyielding persistence of nature. I step carefully along the rooftop, feeling the uneven concrete beneath my boots, the wind tugging at my coat. Every object, every crack, every vine tells a story of time passing, of nature asserting dominion, of life transforming itself quietly and persistently. Even the air seems to vibrate with echoes of the past. Faint sounds of music, laughter, and hurried evacuation overlapping with the rustle of leaves and the brush of fur against broken walls. Finally, I allow myself a moment to absorb the panorama. Pripyat stretches below like a canvas in which humans left a temporary mark, only for nature to reclaim it in vivid, insistent strokes. Moss and ivy, trees and shrubs, animals adapted by absence and radiation, all converge to form a city that lives again in ways humans never intended. The lynx, a reminder of the wild, of danger, of adaptation, had crossed my path, asserting the raw, unfiltered pulse of life. I feel both humbled and exhilarated, aware that I walk not as a conqueror, but as a witness to the resilience of time and the indomitable spirit of nature. The stadium rises from the overgrowth like a monument to forgotten games, a skeletal echo of cheers that once filled the air. In 1986, Avanhard Stadium had been immaculate, its goalposts upright, the bleachers pristine, every line of the pitch carefully chalked and awaiting local matches. Children had chased balls across the field, voices ringing over the stands as parents watched from shaded rows. Today, 30 years later, the stadium is a canvas of reclamation. Grass, thick and uneven, pushes stubbornly through cracks in the pitch. Saplings thrust their roots into the sidelines, tearing through what was once meticulously laid concrete. Nature has encroached with patient insistence, reshaping the stadium into something alien yet fiercely alive. I step cautiously across the moss-draped concrete, each footfall a soft crunch that seems louder than it should be. A pack of wolves patrols the outer edges of the field, their bodies muscular and lean, coats mottled with ash gray, black, and the streaks of time itself. Some fur is patchy, worn thin in places where radiation has left its mark, but their eyes burn with a sharp intelligence that feels both ancient and unnervingly alert. I freeze as one of them lifts its head, ears twitching, sensing the intrusion of my presence. Its gaze follows me a heartbeat too long, molten gold reflecting the fractured light of a sky streaked with pale clouds. For a moment, I feel the raw, undeniable tension between human curiosity and the untamed wild, a silent acknowledgement that I am an interloper in a domain no longer human. Deer wander along the goal lines, antlers tangled in vines and moss, unbothered by the wolves' silent patrol. The contrast between predator and prey feels both absurd and natural here, a world rebalanced by absence and adaptation. Yet, it is not the wolves that make me hold my breath in this chapter of Pripyat's resurgence. It is the wild boars. I first hear them before I see them. A low, guttural grunting, like the sound of old engines struggling to start. The smell hits next, a pungent, metallic stench of wet earth, rotting vegetation, and something fouled beneath the scent of decay. I follow the sound to the edge of the bleachers, and there they are, a family of wild boars, though calling them wild boars no longer seems sufficient. These creatures have been transformed by radiation into grotesque echoes of their former selves. Their bodies are enormous, each as large as a small bear, ribs knotted under thick, bristling hides. Patches of fur are missing, revealing scarred, mottled flesh beneath, splotched in shades of violet and pale green, unnatural colors that ripple under the weak sunlight. Their eyes are bulbous and uncomfortably reflective, some milky with cataracts, others glowing faintly with the luminescent hue of mutated tissue. Tusks jut from twisted jaws, yellowed and jagged, longer than any I have ever seen, curving outward like the claws of a nightmare. They root through the debris of the abandoned stadium with terrifying purpose, overturning benches, tearing up patches of sod, and snapping small saplings with their immense strength. Each snuffle is a percussive note of potential danger, the vibration rolling across the cracked concrete. I freeze, boots sinking slightly into moss and soil, acutely aware that these creatures are neither tame nor entirely predictable. The largest of them, a boar whose bulk alone seems capable of toppling a small car, lifts its head. Its gaze locks on me, nostrils flaring, the air trembling with the raw scent of blood, earth, and something older, wilder, more primeval. I take a careful step back, and the boar's ears flick with sharp precision, picking up the movement. Its companions stiffen, bristling, their bodies coiling with muscle and tension as if ready to spring. I can feel the change in the air. What was distant, a rustle of nature's persistence, has become an immediate, pressing threat. Their mutated forms make them feel like specters from some post-human world, their every movement accentuated by the grotesque exaggeration of growth and deformity. Limbs are thicker, shoulders unnaturally broad. One bears a misshapen snout, bent crookedly to one side, the tip scarred and torn. I realize, with sudden clarity, that these are not animals I can casually pass. They are survivors of something I cannot fully comprehend, hardened into beings that nature and radiation together have made into monsters. A sudden, harsh grunt from the largest boar shatters the tense silence, and I stumble backward over a fractured section of bleacher, heart pounding. The pack responds instantly, snouts lifting, tusks glinting in the fractured sunlight. Their movements are quick, agile despite their size, the ground trembling under their synchronized pounding. I glance toward the Ferris wheel in the distance, skeletal against the sky, and my mind grasps at a thought of sanctuary, a place where I might be less exposed, yet the field is open, and there is nowhere to hide. I slow my breathing, aware that panic could be fatal. The boars advance, low, rumbling grunts accompanying each step. Their eyes, grotesquely human in their intelligence, track mine, assessing, calculating. I can see scars from fights, burns from radiation, and jagged, unnatural growths on their hides. A map of 30 years of adaptation in a place humans abandoned. One of the younger boars, a pale creature, whose fur is half missing, tusks jagged and curling, lunges suddenly at a shattered bench, snapping it in half with ease. The sound echoes across the stadium, and my nerves fray. Instinct drives me to move carefully backward, keeping my gaze fixed on the largest of them. I need to show neither fear nor aggression, a delicate balance, but every instinct screams that I am prey in a world where humans no longer dictate the rules. The boar snorts, and the air vibrates with it. A warning, a pulse of dominance, and I realize that my intrusion has been catalogued. My heart hammers in my chest as the pack begins a slow, deliberate circle, cutting off any retreat. Their mutative forms, skin mottled, tusks like ivory daggers, bodies thick with unnatural muscle, make them appear more formidable than anything I have faced outside the stories of war or survival. I glance up at the Ferris wheel again, imagining the climb, but the distance feels insurmountable. My boots crunch on concrete and soil, my eyes darting for any makeshift barricade. The largest boar snorts again and takes a cautious step forward, and I realize I have to act. I reach for a broken bench, hefting it like a makeshift shield, the wood splintering under my grip. My pulse thrums in my ears as the boars freeze, sizing up my defiance, or perhaps sensing my vulnerability. Then, a sudden distraction. A smaller wolf from the pack I saw earlier bounds through the tall grass at the stadium's edge, snout snapping at the smaller boars. The pack reacts instantly, chaos rippling across the field. The boars collide with each other in a flurry of bristles, tusks, and grunts, temporarily diverted from me. I seize the moment, shoving the shattered bench toward the nearest boar, not to strike, but to assert presence, to show that I am not a helpless target. The creature recoils, a snort tearing through its guttural growl, and I feel a flicker of hope. I inch backward, slowly retracing my path toward the stadium exit, eyes never leaving the pack. Each step is calculated, deliberate. The ground is uneven, littered with the remnants of abandoned games and the scars of 30 years of reclamation. Fallen goalposts, rusted metal, shards of broken bleachers, all become obstacles in my retreat. The boars, though distracted, maintain a threatening presence, their eyes fixed on me, the silent acknowledgement of the hierarchy in this post-human world. Finally, the stadium edge is near. I step over a patch of cracked concrete and slip slightly on moss, catching myself just in time. The largest boar freezes, tusks glinting, muscles coiled like springs. Then, as if by unspoken agreement, the pack begins to drift back toward the center of the pitch, rooting again in the debris, their tension easing, but their dominance asserted. I exhale, a breath I did not realize I had been holding and take a few steps back, finally leaving the immediate danger zone. The Pripyat amusement park stretches before me like a world frozen in mid-breath, a strange fusion of human whimsy and nature's reclamation. The Ferris wheel looms ahead, skeletal against the sky, each empty carriage hanging like a hollow eye peering at the earth. I stand beneath it, looking up, the massive metal spokes like jagged veins against the pale clouds. 30 years ago, children and families would have waited eagerly for May Day celebrations, laughter punctuating the air, the scent of cotton candy and exhaust blending with excitement. Now, the smell is of moss, decaying leaves, and the faint, ever-present metallic tang of lingering radiation. I pause, tracing the outlines of each carriage with my gaze, imagining the children who never rode, the parents who never returned, the vibrancy halted by catastrophe. The skeletal ride is beautiful and tragic, a monument to human joy arrested in time. Sunlight filters through the empty frames, illuminating dust motes that drift like tiny specters, catching on vines that coil around rusted bolts. I breathe slowly, feeling the weight of human absence and the persistent surge of life that has claimed the park. Even here, nature adapts. Birds with pale, almost translucent feathers flit from frame to frame. Foxes weave silently through shadowed corners, and moss blankets every surface, cushioning the skeletal metal as though tucking it into the earth's embrace. Near the bumper cars, the ground is uneven, overgrown with weeds and sprouting grass. I crouch to inspect the vehicles. Once, they were glossy and bright, each painted in bold reds, yellows, and blues, gleaming under festive lights. Now, they are dulled and rusted, vines curling through steering wheels, moss carpeting seats, their engines long silent. I run my hand along the cracked paint, feeling the texture of decay beneath my fingers. There is a haunting intimacy here, the fleeting touch of children, the friction of laughter and collisions, all paused mid-motion by fate. I imagine a small hand clutching the wheel, eyes alight with joy, and I feel an ache for the lives interrupted. Even as nature reclaims the cars, the echoes of human presence linger, stubbornly refusing to vanish entirely. As I rise, I take one last long look at the Ferris wheel. From here, the skeletal amusement park spreads outward, a tangle of rusting rides and overgrown pathways. The juxtaposition of human creation and natural reclamation is stark and almost painful in its clarity. The world humans abandoned has not decayed. It has transformed. Radiation and time have twisted the familiar into something new, something terrifying yet beautiful. And within this transformed landscape, life persists in all its tenacity. Wolves, deer, foxes, and the grotesque wild boars. Each creature a testament to survival in a world reshaped by human absence. I step carefully, moving along a path of cracked concrete and twisted metal, boots crunching softly, aware that each sound carries into this domain of reclaimed life. The Ferris wheel continues to tower above, silent, sentinel-like, and I feel a sense of humility, awe, and something closer to reverence. This is not a playground for humans anymore. It is a cathedral of survival, of mutation, and of time's relentless passage. The amusement park and the stadium speak in whispers of history, catastrophe, in the indomitable force of nature, and I walk with care, heart thrumming, fully awake to the lessons they impart. The brick facade of middle school number 3 rises before me, scarred and mottled with moss, ivy clinging desperately to every crevice. In 1986, this building had been alive with the hum of learning, the scratch of pencils across paper, the shuffle of sneakers on polished floors, and the laughter of children echoing through hallways. Today, it is a mausoleum of abandonment, a place where time seems to fold back on itself, and nature has begun the slow, insistent process of reclamation. My boots crunch across broken pavement as I push open the warped double doors, the metal groaning under decades of corrosion. Inside, the air is thick with dust, mildew, and the faint metallic undertone of something radioactive lingering in the walls and floorboards. Desks are overturned, chairs toppled, and pencil stubs lie abandoned in shattered inkwells. On the walls, faded drawings cling tenuously, scribbled animals, blocky letters, suns with crooked rays, some smudged or torn entirely. I pause, imagining the small hands that drew them, the eyes bright with curiosity, the minds alive with questions, abruptly halted by evacuation. The sudden loss presses against me, and I feel the weight of 30 years of absence in every corner. My gaze falls to the floor, and my chest tightens. Child-sized gas masks are strewn across cracked tiles, their brittle plastics warped by time. Some straps curl like dead vines. Some lenses are clouded or shattered. I kneel to inspect one, fingertips tracing the imprint of a tiny face, imagining the fear, confusion, and determination that child carried in a single, terrified moment. Each mask is a relic of interrupted life, an artifact of innocence snatched by disaster. The echoes of laughter, lessons, and recess fade as I move through the hallway, replaced by the soft patter of my boots on broken tiles and the whisper of wind slipping through shattered windows. Then, movement, soft at first, distant, almost imperceptible, catches my attention. There is a rhythmic thudding sound, growing louder with each passing heartbeat, bouncing off walls and ceilings. My breath catches. Something approaches. My mind races. Wolves? A pack of mutated predators? I strain into the dim corridor, searching for a hint of shape, a shadow, but the source remains elusive. Anxiety coils in my chest as the rhythm quickens, deliberate yet chaotic, echoing like a slow drumbeat of tension. And then they appear. From around a corner, a flock of deer bursts into view. But they are no ordinary creatures. These are beings transformed by decades of radiation, mutated in ways that make them at once fascinating and unnerving. Limbs elongated, muscles exaggerated beneath pallid, mottled hides. Antlers spiral and twist in impossible shapes, jutting in jagged angles like the shards of broken crystal. Their eyes glimmer with faint, unnatural hues, amber and icy blue, catching the dim light with spectral intensity. Hooves strike the cracked tiles with a muted yet resonant thump, echoing down the hall. For a heartbeat, relief washes over me. It is not a predator, but shock follows instantly at the sight of their mutations. I freeze against the wall, watching the pack navigate the hall with an eerie grace. One younger deer, its coat streaked with pale gray and violet, brushes past me, snout twitching, antlers scraping against a sagging ceiling tile, sending down a small cloud of plaster dust. Another pauses near a toppled desk, its elongated neck bending toward a gas mask on the floor. The symbolism is stark. The object once meant to protect a child now meets a creature transformed by a world abandoned by humans. I kneel, picking up another mask, feeling the imprint of small fingers, imagining the brief, terrifying moment it might have been worn. The world outside suddenly rendered hostile. The pack moves on, hooves echoing softly. Their eyes seem almost intelligent, aware of my presence, yet unthreatened. I follow cautiously, boots crunching on debris, watching them weave past broken lockers and faded bulletin boards announcing plays, tests, and events that will never happen. Each step feels weighted with history, 30 years of silence pressing into my chest alongside the vibrant, unsettling life of mutation. After a final glance at the hallway, so full of absence and yet strangely alive, I turn to leave. Pushing the warped doors open, I step onto the cracked sidewalk outside. The street is quiet, overgrown with weeds and moss, littered with fragments of asphalt and concrete. Broken signs tilt at impossible angles, ivy crawling up every vertical surface it can claim. Birds wheel overhead, some with feathers ghostly pale, traces of mutation shaping the natural order here. My boots press against the uneven pavement as I make my way toward the azure swimming pool, only a street over, observing how the city itself has surrendered to nature. Along the way, small signs of life thread through the urban decay. A fox darts across the cracked street, disappearing into the ivy-clad remains of a fence. A family of squirrels chases each other along the twisted metal remnants of a playground. Trees burst through the asphalt, roots heaving concrete slabs skyward. I hear the faint rustle of leaves in abandoned courtyards, the soft flutter of wings, and the distant, subtle sound of hooves striking debris. A reminder that life persists, even when transformed by radiation and human absence. The air smells of damp earth and decay, layered with the lingering metallic tinge that marks a city still haunted by its invisible history. Shadows lengthen as I continue along the street. Every corner I turn reveals a scene frozen yet alive. Moss, pushing through fractured asphalt. Weeds overtaking broken fences. Stray branches, twisting skyward. In some places, the concrete itself seems almost alive. Roots prying apart corners. Vines threading their way through cracks like the fingers of time. I catch glimpses of movement, small birds darting into safety, a fox slipping behind a collapsed wall, and, momentarily, 2 deer crossing the street at a distance, their forms elongated, otherworldly, their antlers catching the dying light. My heart hits. This city is a museum of mutation, a world simultaneously beautiful and alien. Finally, the azure swimming pool comes into view. The building is partially collapsed, windows shattered, the air thick with the scent of moss, damp tiles, and decay. In 1986, this space had been chlorine-scented and orderly, a haven for children and families to learn, play, and compete in structured activity. Today, it is a stage for survival in forms that humans cannot comprehend. The pool itself is empty, cracked along its edges, lane markers strewn in twisted, moss-covered lines. Sunlight pours in through the broken windows, highlighting dust motes that float lazily in the air, catching on the long, sinewy forms of wildlife that have made this place home. A family of wild boars explores the deep end, snouts rooting through cracked tiles. Foxes slip silently along shadowed corners, eyes glinting with alert intelligence. And farther down, in a long, echoing corridor, I catch the distant patter of hooves. Deer pass cautiously, their bodies sleek but altered, heads lifting as they navigate the fractured tiles. The mutations are less dramatic than in the school hallways, but noticeable. Antlers thinner and sharper, legs slightly elongated, eyes reflecting the unnatural light with a glimmer of unearthly awareness. I move along the edge of the pool, careful to avoid moss-slicked tiles. Broken lane markers jut upward like jagged fingers, creating an eerie underwater landscape frozen in place. I kneel at the edge, touching the tiles, imagining the sound of splashing and laughter that once filled the hall. Children racing, teachers calling encouragement, families watching from the bleachers. Moments of ordinary life abruptly ended, swallowed by catastrophe and time. The juxtaposition is painful. The vibrancy of mutation and reclamation against the haunting absence of childhood. I pause at the remnants of a lifeguard chair. Moss climbs its legs, and a pale bird, its feathers streaked with ghostly hues, rests atop it, observing me with an unsettling intelligence. I imagine a lifeguard calling time, the whistle cutting through chlorine-scented air, the excitement and nervous energy of a school day, and realize all of that is gone. The children who might have grown, learned, laughed, and discovered now exist only in fragments. Pencil sketches, gas masks left behind, memories etched into abandoned brick and tile. Movement catches my eye. A doe steps carefully over the cracked pool tiles, followed by a fawn with limbs elongated, joints bending slightly differently than nature intended. Their presence is graceful, yet haunting, the inevitable consequence of life persisting without human interference. I step back, awed, remembering the mutated deer I encountered inside the school, and I cannot help but reflect on the strange, quiet resilience of life. In this reclaimed space, survival has no rules, and mutation is the currency of persistence. I crouch near the pool's edge, leaning over to examine a patch of moss climbing up a faded lane marker. A pair of fawns emerges from the shadow of a collapsed diving board, their eyes wide, reflective, and strangely intelligent. The bones of the diving board jut upward like skeletal fingers, a remnant of human achievement now bent toward nature. The deer pause, sniffing the air, ears flicking at sounds too subtle for my human ears. Their coats glint with silvery patches, marking the lingering touch of radiation, and their antlers twist upward like jagged horns, beautiful and unsettling. I imagine children jumping from that board, the thrill, the laughter, the splash, and the abrupt absence that followed. The contrast between the fleeting human joy and the enduring, strange wildlife presses down on me with unbearable weight. Standing slowly, I let my eyes roam the entire space. Birds wheel overhead, deer move cautiously among the shadows. Foxes slip silently through broken walls, and boars root at the edges, sending up clouds of dust and earth. The city, the school, and the pool exist now in a fragile equilibrium. Human history etched in debris, children's innocence frozen in artifacts, and the raw pulse of mutated life asserting itself over every inch of reclaimed territory. Pripyat, 30 years after the evacuation, is a tapestry of interruption and persistence, of grief and survival, of absence and mutation. I walk slowly back toward the street, aware that every step takes me through a living museum of what was lost and what remains, acutely conscious that in these abandoned classrooms, hallways, and pools, the memory of children, of ordinary human life, is threaded inseparably with the extraordinary, mutated forms of life that now dominate this strange, quiet world. Leaving the azure swimming pool behind, I step onto the cracked, uneven streets that wind through this part of Pripyat. The air carries a mix of damp earth and the faint metallic tang of old chlorine, lingering like a ghost from the pool. Sunlight glances off broken glass, glinting like scattered shards of memory across moss-covered sidewalks. Weeds push through the asphalt, their green blades stabbing defiantly between cracks, and trees stretch up toward fractured windows, branches twisting as if to grasp what remains of the city. As I walk, the sounds of wildlife punctuate the silence. A crow caws sharply from a skeletal lamppost, startling a small flock of pale, mutated pigeons that wheel across the sky in tight, jittery circles. A squirrel, its fur patchy and gray-tinged, scurries along a fallen fence, pausing mid-leap to assess me with alert eyes. Here and there, abandoned bicycles lie half-swallowed by ivy, rusted chains clicking faintly in the breeze. Broken street signs tilt at impossible angles, bearing faded Cyrillic lettering, their meaning obscured by moss and decay. I step carefully over scattered debris, shattered windows, fragments of concrete, and what appears to be a child's shoe left behind in 1986. Its small size and faded pattern pull at the edges of the memory. The laughter and chatter that once filled this street, replaced now by the quiet, insistent claims of nature. Vines snake across sidewalks, wrapping around benches, lampposts, and fire hydrants. The occasional rustle hints at unseen animals. A fox slipping through a hedge, a raccoon-like creature darting between rubble, or a small deer grazing cautiously along the fringes of the abandoned schoolyard. Approaching the river, the street opens slightly into a wide avenue where tall apartment blocks loom, like guardians of a long-lost era. Their cracked facades are streaked with black from water damage, roots pushing through shattered concrete. Windows gape empty, some containing nests of birds whose feathers shimmer in shades of gray and pale white, a subtle indication of radiation's lingering influence. Broken playground equipment lies twisted among weeds. A swing set tilts sideways, chains rusted and slack, and the faint outline of hopscotch painted decades ago still glimmers faintly under layers of moss. A gentle breeze carries the distant sound of water, a low ripple that promises the river's approach. I slow my pace, boots crunching softly over the uneven asphalt, and survey the abandoned street as if scanning for movement. Deer have been sighted along these edges before, cautious but drawn to the quiet reclamation of human spaces. I hear a rustle behind a toppled fence and catch a glimpse of a single, pale-hued fox disappearing into the shadows. Every sense is heightened. The soft hum of wind through fractured walls, the distant clatter of a branch or stone disturbed, the sharp, metallic hint in the air that speaks of decay, rust, and old infrastructure yielding to time. Finally, the riverbank opens into view. The Pripyat River stretches wide and slow before me, its waters dark and sluggish, reflecting the bruised sky. Wooden docks lean precariously over the current, planks warped and slick with moss and algae, some partially submerged from decades of neglect. The air carries a faint brackish scent, mixed with sediment and decaying vegetation. In the distance, the skeletal remains of small boats sit tilted against the docks, their wood cracked and peeling. Otters dart gracefully through the water, sleek bodies glinting under faint sunlight, paws skimming the surface in practiced arcs. Beavers paddle slowly, dragging branches and twigs to reinforce dams along the shoreline, shaping the river to suit their needs. Birds wheel overhead, landing occasionally on broken masts or leaning planks, their feathers pale, oddly patterned, or streaked, as if radiation has left its permanent signature on their genes. Every movement is purposeful, deliberate, a quiet testament to the adaptability of life in a world abandoned by humans, but forever altered by contamination. I make my way along the edge of the river, boots squelching slightly in patches of soft mud, as Hospital Number 126 rises ahead, a dark sentinel of suffering and survival. Its facade is scarred by time, windows shattered, railings twisted, paint peeled away to reveal bare concrete beneath. Inside, the smell of mold, mildew, and rusted metal dominates, overlaid with the faint metallic tang of decades-old medical equipment. I remember the hallways in 1986, echoing with hurried steps, the groans of patients exposed to radiation, and the urgent whispers of nurses and doctors scrambling to provide care. Today, the building is still, frozen in time, except for the creatures that move through it with quiet authority. Foxes weave through the corridors, their amber eyes alert and intelligent. Birds nest in ceilings, chirping faintly. And in the distance, I hear the deliberate, soft steps of wolves. I freeze, listening. The rhythmic padding echoes off walls, the low rustle of fur brushing tile and debris. There is authority in their movement, a predatory grace born from decades of survival in a radioactive, human-free environment. From a distant hallway, I notice movement. An unaware deer, cautiously stepping over broken tile. Its delicate hooves click softly, echoing through the hollow building. Every sound amplified in the emptiness. The wolves fan outward, muscles coiled, noses low, eyes fixed on the prey. Their mutations are stark, fur mottled and thickened, tufts bristling along spines and shoulders, eyes glinting with copper and ice, elongated limbs and exaggerated musculature. ears angular and hyper-aware, jaws wider, teeth sharper, honed for survival in a world they did not inherit, but now dominate. The deer freezes, ears flicking, nostrils flaring, sensing the predators, but too late to react fully. With a sudden burst, the lead wolf lunges, powerful limbs propelling it forward like a shadow tearing through the hall. The deer bolts, hooves scraping, antlers catching what remains of sunlight. Other wolves fan in, teeth snapping, claws raking against the broken floor. Time stretches as predator and prey move through a visceral, brutal ballet. Within moments, the deer collapses under the coordinated attack, the echoes of its struggle resounding through the hospital. The pack feeds methodically, consuming the deer with an efficiency born of instinct sharpened by generations exposed to contaminated food. The radiation-infused flesh will perpetuate further mutations in the pack, reshaping fur, bone structure, and even behavior over generations. I step back, breathless, both relieved and awed by the scene. The raw persistence of life in its most primal form on full display. After the hunt, the wolves move on, silent and deliberate. Their passage leaves the hall quiet, save for the faint scent, iron fur, and the lingering echo of the kill. I pause, kneeling near a broken gurney, and reflect on the people who were once here. The nurses, the patients, the children, the elderly, whose lives were upended by evacuation and catastrophe. Their absence has allowed a new, harsher order to emerge, where mutation, survival, and adaptation dominate. Stepping back into the fading light of late afternoon, I return to the river's edge. Otters slip beneath the water, beavers adjust their makeshift dams, and the occasional fox slinks among reeds. The docks, once silent and human-bound, are now stages for survival and adaptation. Wolves, deer, boars, and birds, all influenced by the invisible radiation, dominate the landscape, each generation subtly changed, each creature a living testament to resilience, mutation, and the passage of time. I pause again, boots sinking slightly into the damp soil, watching the river reflect the bruised clouds above. The hunt lingers in my mind, the raw power of the wolves, the desperation of the deer, the inevitability of life, persisting, mutating, and adapting. Human absence, catastrophe, and radiation have reshaped this city beyond recognition. And yet, life continues, in forms both familiar and frighteningly alien. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows across docks and riverbank. A lone wolf pauses on a distant embankment, head tilted, ears flicking, eyes glinting with predatory awareness. Behind it, a deer moves cautiously along the tree line. Mutations, adaptations, and survival coexist in this quiet, harrowing ecosystem. A world where humans once dominated, but now only linger in memory and abandoned structures. I turn my gaze to hospital number 126 once more, reflecting on how human life has been replaced, altered, and reshaped. The echoes of the past, the hurried footsteps, the groans of the afflicted, the fear and hope intertwined, linger faintly against the walls, overlaid now with the sounds of nature asserting itself. Wolves, deer, foxes, otters, birds, all thrive, persist, and mutate in ways that speak to the resilience and adaptability of life, forever altered by absence and contamination. I leave hospital number 126 behind, stepping carefully along cracked, weed-choked streets that lead toward the edge of the red forest. Concrete slabs have been pushed upward by the relentless growth of roots. Moss creeps along rusting road signs, and abandoned vehicles, frozen mid-flee in 1986, are now half buried in grass and mud. The air carries a faint metallic tang, mingled with damp earth and the subtle scent of mold, yet underneath lies the unmistakable undertone of decay. A land left to its own devices for decades. The skeletal remains of apartment blocks line the streets. Their windows are gaping eyes staring into nothingness, walls pocked with the scars of time and neglect. Birds, pale and strangely marked by generations of radiation, wheel overhead, calling softly to one another. Their songs echo through the empty streets, amplified against the stillness, a muted reminder that life persists even here. Nature has reclaimed this city with deliberate patience. Small shoots of grass and ivy push through every crack in the sidewalks. Trees grow in former courtyards, roots splitting concrete with silent insistence. Even the tiniest crevices teem with life, indifferent to human absence. 30 years of abandonment have created a space where life and decay coexist in uneasy harmony. The red forest comes into view, a jagged, almost foreboding line of shadow and green against the horizon. In 1986, this place was a scene of immediate devastation. Trees blackened, brittle, their needles scattered like ashes, and a choking haze hung in the air. Today, it is astonishingly alive. Dense branches twist upward and outward, forming a tangled canopy, and the forest floor is rich with moss, ferns, and undergrowth. Birds flit along the treetops, some with pale feathers streaked as if marked by time itself. The forest, once synonymous with death, now radiates vitality, resilient and untamed. As I step closer, the details sharpen. Trees rise like sculpted pillars, bark deeply grooved, limbs twisted from years of exposure and radiation. Small animals scurry through the underbrush, squirrels with mottled fur, foxes with pale streaks, rabbits whose coats shimmer faintly in the dappled sunlight. The contrast is staggering. A place that once looked lifeless now thrums with strange energy. The soil underfoot shifts beneath my boots, soft, littered with needles, branches, and leaf litter. The air feels thick, humid, alive with scent. Pine, moss, and decay blending into a complex, almost intoxicating perfume. I pause near the forest edge, where shafts of light filter through twisted branches in fractured patterns. Insects crawl over fallen leaves, their exoskeletons glinting in strange, iridescent colors. Purples, greens, silvers that seem almost impossible. Every sound is amplified. A twig snaps, leaves rustle, a distant bird call echoes, and soft, deliberate padding, the sound of some larger animal moving through the underbrush. My chest tightens. There is a weight here, a tension pressing against me like the forest itself is watching, waiting. Then chaos erupts. A low, guttural roar cuts through the quiet, shaking the air. I spin toward the sound and see them. Two massive brown bears, both males, colliding in a violent, primal battle. The forest floor trembles with their weight. Leaves and debris thrown into the air as they rear, swipe, and slam into one another. Their fur is thick, coarse, mottled with scars and dust, and their eyes glint with rage, instinct, and pure survival. This is no gentle dominance display. This is raw combat. Each moment a fight for supremacy. Each strike carrying lethal intent. The larger bear slams its shoulder into its rival, sending him staggering backward into a tangle of roots and ferns. The smaller bear snaps back, jaws opening wide, and sinks his teeth into the other's thick neck, tearing deep. Blood mats their fur in glistening streaks, stark against the brown and black of their coats. The sound is sickening and majestic all at once. The crunch of bone, the grunt of exertion, the wild cries echoing through the forest like thunder. The wounded bear stumbles, muscles trembling, eyes wide with shock and pain. He thrashes violently, but the bite has done its work, and he begins limping away, leaving a trail of blood in his wake. The victor shakes himself violently, nostrils flaring, growls vibrating from deep within, and then, almost imperceptibly, he pauses to survey the forest, marking his territory with the scent of dominance and victory. This brutal encounter is the product of decades of human absence. Since the 1986 evacuation, large mammal populations, particularly brown bears, have increased steadily. Without hunting, habitat destruction, or human encroachment, these animals have thrived. Wolves, deer, boar, and even lynx have repopulated the exclusion zone. Here, life exists in forms both familiar and mutated, untamed and mercilessly real. The bears embody the resilience of the wilderness. Their battles, a stark reminder that the forest is alive with laws older than humanity itself. I step carefully over churned soil and broken branches, heart still racing from the spectacle. The forest is alive in ways I could not have imagined, a theater of survival, adaptation, and the raw brutality of nature reclaiming its own. Even the light seems sharper, filtering through the canopy in golden beams that illuminate the crimson scars of the red forest. The ground begins to open, revealing the approach to reactor number 4. Rusted fences, warning signs, and monitoring equipment are partially consumed by moss and ferns. Broken asphalt and gravel crunch beneath my boots. Small signs of wildlife mark the soil. Paw prints, chewed vegetation, feathers caught on rusted metal. Everything tells the story of a landscape in transformation. Human absence, catastrophe, and the relentless persistence of life. Reactor number 4 looms ahead, massive and silent under the new safe confinement. In 1986, smoke and fire had risen from this core, a lethal cloud reshaping countless lives. Today, the structure is quiet, almost serene, yet every shadow, every rusted fragment of machinery speaks to disaster, human error, and loss. The silence is not empty. It is filled with memory, radiation's lingering presence, and the echo of lives uprooted. Standing here, I think of the people, the families who fled, children clutching toys and blankets, workers who faced the fire with courage and no knowledge of the invisible threat. I think of the animals, the bears, the wolves, the mutated deer, thriving where humans once imposed control. The land tells a story that spans decades, intertwining human tragedy with natural reclamation. The Red Forest and Reactor 4 together are monuments, one to resilience, the other to catastrophe. The forest is alive, vivid, and brutal. The reactor is silent, imposing, and eternal. Both are reminders of how quickly human plans can unravel and how life, stubborn and adaptive, finds a way even in the most toxic circumstances. I exhale slowly, letting the intensity of the bear fight, the density of the forest, and the looming presence of the reactor settle around me. Time in the exclusion zone is layered. Past and present intersect in every step. In every rustling leaf and paw print, life endures here, often in forms reshaped by radiation, hunger, and survival instinct. The memory of 1986 lingers, but it no longer dominates. Instead, it exists alongside the astonishing persistence of nature. I turn, taking one last sweep of the landscape. The bears have vanished into the forest, leaving only broken branches and churned soil. The red forest shimmers with green and crimson, sunlight reflecting off moss and leaves. The river glints faintly in the distance. The reactor stands as a quiet sentinel over a land both scarred and reclaimed, here at this intersection of human absence and wild presence. I feel the paradox of Chernobyl, tragedy and resilience, catastrophe and adaptation, death and the fierce insistence of life. The scars remain, but so does growth. The lessons linger, whispered through the forest, carried on the wind, and encoded in every paw print and every fallen needle. I step away, letting the weight of the exclusion zone press gently on my shoulders, and I carry with me a deep, humbling understanding. Life continues, shaped by both human folly and natural perseverance. Brutal, yet beautiful. Fragile, yet stubbornly enduring. Rest easy, friends. The rabbit hole of time holds many more slow steps. Until we meet again, Silas is signing off.